Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be ranking and rating all of the Runelords novels by David Farland. Now, if you're new to my channel, I love the Runelords series. It is one of my top favorite fantasy series of all time, and I've actually gotten some requests to do a ranking video for the books, and I thought that would be quite a lot of fun. Obviously, my ranking is just personal for me. I know other people will have other books in the series that they'll love even more, but it is, I think, an excellent series worthy of any fantasy fans reading. And so I will go through all 8 books that have been released up to this point and my ranking for them. I have another Runelords video on book pitches that I would like to make of books I think that would be great additions, especially if Farland ever gets around to finishing the final book. So, to begin with, I will start with the lowest rating on my list, which is the book Sons of the Oak. This is the 5th book in the series. I gave this book a 5.3 out of 10, and honestly, I think I should have given it a lower rating. This book was so frustrating to read. This is the one book that I would say David Farland did poorly. Now, this book had a lot of potential at the beginning of the book because it opens up to this magnificent epic fantasy scene. And I thought, oh my goodness, we are going. This is so good. And then the rest of the book falls off the wagon. This book, its biggest problem is that he decided to go off the map, literally. This book, most of the events, you can't find it on the map that's in the book, and the other problem with it is that you don't really understand why they're going exactly where they're going, what the objective is. All you know is that they're running. Yes, they're running from the bad guys, but you don't understand why they're running, and it's very unclear, and it's just not an enjoyable read. It has a bit of a climax for an ending. This book felt like a transition book. The first 4 books in the series are an arc, and the last couple books in the series are an arc. This book contains all the characters from the second arc, but it doesn't really fit in the whole continuity of the second arc. It really stands alone. It kind of straddles the 2 arcs together, and it really felt like a transition book, and I really was disappointed. This is the only book I really didn't really care for. The next book on the list is book 4 in the series, The Lair of Bones, which is the book that kind of ties it all together. This is the book that ends the first arc of the series. And this book, I just think, is so good in some areas and so disappointing in others. I'm a big fan of movie studios writing exactly what the authors wrote for their scripts and doing just exactly what's on the page. But if I could adapt, this is the only book I would change because I think this book should have been changed. One of the changes I would make is to focus more on the fighting above ground. So much of this book takes place in caves underground as they're searching for something. I don't want to give away what it is. And we spend so much time in there. And not that I am against writing books in dark places underground, but this book meanders and it just felt like they should have done that. But the action in this book is great. The climax and ending of this book is great. It's sad, it's happy, it is mournful, it is joyous, victorious. There's so many ways. And this was an excellent ending for the series. And I really think that the only reason he continued with the series was because Tor had good book sales and wanted him to continue with the series. But this was a very natural ending to the books. Book 4. I gave this a 7.0 out of 10. Good book, but I had some issues with it. We're now getting into, I was really liking these books. I really thought these were good. And this book is The Wormling Horde. And I loved so much about this book. The way that the traveling to the new world, the way that the worlds are bending in this book, they've been bound together. All of that was done brilliantly. I loved meeting the other versions of our characters. I loved the romance that kind of blossoms between some of the characters. And I was pleasantly surprised when I learned that one of the characters was not actually tortured for the whole book. I was expecting a whole torture sequence that would be long and drawn out, like in Wizard's First Rule, but that was not the case in this book. In this book, it was quick, and it gets over with, and you continue on with the story, and it was very good. The biggest problem with this book? It's too short. This is the shortest book in the series, and honestly, it feels like he wrote this book to just write a book, and he was trying to write fast to get a book every year at the time, but maybe he should have taken a little time making this book a little longer, added a few more scenes of the romance, which was really good. And also, by the way, this cover art, oh my goodness, the cover art of the whole series is just amazing. My favorite fantasy artist is Daryl K. Sweet, and Daryl K. Sweet just did a fantastic job on this book as well, as he did on every book, let's be honest. So this is, this book I gave about a 7.2 out of 10. Really strong book in the series. The next book in the series is I have very similar thoughts. Worldbinder. I think that this book has the best hook of any book. If you said the only way to save the world is to combine it with another world, I'd be like, yeah, that's a good pitch for a book. This book, in hindsight, kind of reminds me in a few ways of like No Way Home for Spider-Man. There's some connections, I think, between the two. But this book introduces the Wormling Horde that I think is just very compelling characters and villains. This book is the 6th book in the series. It precedes the book The Wormling Horde, and they are menacing villains, and they produce amazing action, and there's castles, and there's battles, and there's small character moments. You see the love between the character of Rihanna and the character of Gaborn's son, the youngest Val Orden. And it's just, I mean, every which way you look at it, this was just a really well done book. There were some problems, however, some minor problems, some pacing issues. There were some issues in that it felt it could have been longer, and I felt like the opening of the book should have been stronger. The villains, they're not introduced well. They are maintained well in the series. They're amazing villains, but they're not introduced well. I gave this book a 7.2 as well out of 10. The next book on my list is odd that it's so high on the list because I don't feel like it is, but after rethinking about all this, I said yes it is, and that is Chaos Bound. It is the most recent release, is book 8 in the list, and it is what I call the side quest. This is the book that makes me go, did we really need that in a book? I mean, it was good. It was a great read, but did we need it? This book follows Borenson and his family as they are now journeying to try to meet up with the rest of the main characters. What makes this book so good is it reminds me of the best of the Forgotten Realms D&D books. It may be a side quest, but it was an excellently done side quest. I think that it delved into the character of Borenson in a way that none of the other books had. And I think it also just has fantastic action and great world building and themes. This book had excellent world building themes and asked a ton of deep, dark questions that I think were wonderful. A few problems with the book was, first of all, this cover art. Obviously, Daryl K. Sweet slowed down around the end of his life and wasn't doing as much cover art. And also the series sales were down, so it was hard to pay for someone as epic as him. This artist, while it's a good cover art in and of itself, it doesn't feel like it fits the rest of the series, much like the book in some ways doesn't feel like it fits the rest of the series, and as a result, this feels like the odd book out in cover design and in the cover, the painting itself. But also, as I said, side quest. If this book had felt more like the main part of the book, like at the end of the book, I totally understand why David Farland wrote this. This was necessary, but the way it happened, it just feels totally odd, especially since this is the most recent release because the final book hasn't come out yet. I said in my review, if the final book comes out, I think that this will move up in my view because it will have seemed as worth it. But at the moment, if this feels unnecessary, and he should have spent the time working on the final book instead. So I gave this about a 7.3. The next and the final, my top 3 books in my list, I think are just some of the best fantasy books out there. I think these are the books that hooked me into the series, and these are the books that made me a lifelong Runelords fan, and so I think they're all excellent. So the first book on my series is Brotherhood of the Wolf. I gave this an 8.0 out of 10. I think that this is a wonderful sequel. This is the second book in the series. What made this book so strong was the epic scope. This was when he said, all right, saw what I did? We were just inheriting in the first book. Well, now I'm going to take you everywhere. You're not just in Castle Silveresta in this book. We're going to all the kingdoms in this book. You're going down to Ankara, you're going down to Indhopol, you're going over to other places, and it's just so cool. And you meet some characters in this book that made me go, what? You can do that? That's awesome. And I also met some characters that made me go, ugh, that's a bit gross and creepy. Why? The villain, Rajan is a cruel, creepy dude. And he has weird desires. And what also made this book such an enjoyable book was the side quests that it produced and how it connected them. This book added a whole slew of characters. This book kind of felt almost like you know how Game of Thrones or Wheel of Time is jumping between all these various perspectives? This book did that. The other books in the Runelords series jump between perspectives, but they're overall a core group of characters. This one expands it a lot, and you don't know why it's going there. But it goes there, and it's totally worth it. And so, Brotherhood of the Wolf, an excellent sequel. Then you get to the best of the sequels, which is Wizardborn, which I gave an 8.5 out of 10. Oh my goodness, first of all, this cover is beautiful. I love it. Also, this was, as far as I understand, the only book to reach the New York Times list, at least the only one that I could tell from my research. And this was the book that made me go, oh, I see where he's going. I see where he's going with this series. And I think that David Farland really hit his stride as usual with this series, with this book. This book has the best ending of any book in the series. It has epic highs. It has so sad lows. This is the book that your characters are broken and trying to rebuild everything back together. And it just has some amazing scenes that just made me go, I need to read the next book. I need to read the next book, which is exactly what the series should do. But the best book in the entire series, in my opinion, is the first book in the series, The Runelords. The world building in this book is the best of any single fantasy novel, in my opinion. I was amazed at everything that he threw into this one book, and I'm amazed that it has as few page count as it is, because it is wonderful. It is a wonderful book. I think that this book alone would stand the test of time as being one of the best books in fantasy ever, period. I love it. Of course, you see the amazing cover art by Daryl K. Sweet is what drew me to the book, as well as knowing who David Farland was. I'd read one of his Star Wars books, didn't love it, but I was interested in hearing him, especially since I knew who his pupils were when he taught writing at BYU. So I picked up this book, and this book made me just have to buy. I bought all the others just because I bought this one book. And now I have multiple versions of the copies of this book because I just had to have them because they're just so good. This book, Gaborn, and Val Orden, and Raj Aten, and the Silverestas, and Marima and Borenson. The Marima Borenson story was just gold. Like, who came up with that? That was brilliant. Who came up with that? That was great. That was really good. So this book I gave a 9.0 out of 10. And honestly, I almost want to rate it higher because I love it. I just love this book so much. And I could rave about this book all the time. But that's my number one book of the Runelords series. What is your ranking if you've read the Runelords? What do you think of the books? Do you think you have some that you enjoyed more than I did? Or are there some that you're amazed that I have higher on my list? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. You'll be able to see more in your feed. If you like this video, also like the video. It'll help the algorithm. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.